Hi everyone, and welcome to the ZBrush tutorial. This tutorial is great for the beginners. I actually been teaching this tutorial to my class and all my students managed to finish it. So I feel like this is a great tutorial for those people who just want to try out ZBrush, who want to create their own first model, render it out and get already some sort of a final product. And I'm gonna try to explain as much as I can in detail everything that I'm doing so that you would have like a good knowledge of what basically is happening and what exactly you're doing. And I think another important factor to understand is that it's not about just copying me, but it's also trying your own stuff, trying to add your own things so that it would be your own unique artwork. Because, you know, if you're just following me step by step, you're most likely not really gonna learn anything new. So I would recommend you to also kind of like play around with the tools to get the feel for yourself. What do they do and how do they work? So this tutorial is most likely going to be separated into several parts, but we'll start with the modeling, and yeah, just as it goes, you will see the other videos on my channel. So the first thing I want to start with is what kind of model are we going to be working on, right? So I prepared this model, and this model is made by the artist that is created currently on the screen. So as you can see, it's just a simple model of an ice cream, and you know, it can be done in Blender as well with the hard surface modeling tools. But I think like it would be interesting to just kind of try to recreate it in ZBrush and see what we can essentially achieve with it. And before we start sculpting, actually, I recommend you to just kind of like already start getting into your head the image of what the model essentially is consisting of. So every single object, you know, in a model, no matter how complex it is, could be broken down into simpler shapes, right? So essentially here, for example, we have you know, the stick, and we also have here the body, and the body, you know, it could be essentially a cylinder, maybe extruded cylinder, or it could be like a cube, also an extruded cube, you know, and this is something that you have to consider already, like what does this model consist of, right? So the stick, we can use a cube here, just then subdivide it, smooth it out, and we get the stick. The body, also the same thing, we can use the cube here, then we can cut out this area within the ice cream body, then we can create this kind of like melting part, then the ice, and it's just two extruded cylinders kind of like laid on top of each other, as you can see with a little bit of bend here. And also there is like a tongue, and tongue essentially could also be just a smoothed out cube, and then we'll be able to deform it so that it would look like more like a tongue. And as you can see, also the mouth itself, we'll be able to also probably sculpt it out into the body, and then around we'll just add some extrusion so that would look similar to the reference. So let's just begin straight away. You know, once you open up ZBrush, the first challenge that you're encountering is having this window here, you know, and if you never worked with ZBrush, it's like, how do I close it, right? Like, what is this menu? Like, why do you even have it? Like, I don't want to have this menu. I want to start working on ZBrush. I want to start working on my models. Well, to close it, you actually need to press comma on your keyboard. So once you press the comma on your keyboard, as you can see, it disappears. And now another thing that we have is that the canvas size is actually not the full screen, because there is like these borders on the left and then the borders on the right here. So essentially we can actually make the canvas size bigger so that it will be more comfortable for us to work with it. So let me just go to this document tab here on the top. I can press this double size. So once I press it, as you can see, my window became bigger. So essentially my canvas size became bigger as well. Another thing like about the ZBrush, that it doesn't start out straight away in 3D view. It starts out in a 2.5D. And this has to do with the history of ZBrush. And, you know, I'm not going to get too much deep into it, but essentially you do not start with a 3D mode. You start with a 2.5D mode. So you have to switch to the 3D mode. So to do so, to clear the screen, I'm going to press Ctrl N. So once I press it, to do so, I need to first add the object that I want to start sculpting with, right? So let's look here at the reference again. So this object, it could be like just a cube, as I said. So let's try to find the cube here. If I press here, and there is a lot of different subtools that I can use, or tools. So I'm going to select this cube 3D. And once I select the cube 3D, you know, I can start drawing it. So I just simply click and drag, and as you can see, this cube starts to appear, and I can press Shift to kind of like lock it in one axis. So once I do so, I still cannot really use it yet because it's still in 2.5D, and I wouldn't press anything yet. If you did press something and you accidentally like created a new cube and now you're all confused, just press Ctrl N again and draw the cube and Shift, and then it will be locked in one axis. So to start seeing the cube in 3D, we can press T on our keyboard. So once I press T, as you can see, now I can move around and we have it in 3D space. And if it's a bit confusing for you to see how exactly, where exactly the cube is located, we can press this bottom floor here in the corner. And now we can see the floor for the cube. And we can start essentially working with it. But before you start sculpting or doing any changes to the cube, you still cannot do it. ZBrush won't let you just jump right into it. It says to you, to enable sculpting, please convert it to Polymesh 3D. And another thing that I want to mention is that if you have this kind of like windows popping up in ZBrush, you need to read them. They are there for a reason. And that's what I noticed when I was working with my students, is that they just like see this window and they just simply skip it, and if you just read it, you would know why it's not working. You would know what is happening. So this window is there for a reason. So read the text and you'll understand like what you need to do. So make Polymesh 3D. I'm going to press this button here on the right, as you can see, make Polymesh 3D. So once I press it, now I can finally start sculpting. And I'm going to explain more about the tools that I'm using. I'm not gonna dive super deep into the tools because it might take a very, very long time for us to finish this model if I just dive in every single tool. But I'll try to explain to you like as much as I can. So the first thing also that you want to do is basically know how to navigate in ZBrush, right? I mean, because if you never worked with 3D software and maybe you worked with Blender, the ZBrush is very different in terms of navigating within the software. So to navigate within the viewport, you need to press Alt and hold it and just move with the mouse left click. So while you're holding Alt, just move your mouse within the viewport, and as you can see, it starts moving. So that's how you can move around, and just like releasing Alt and just like using left click, you can look around the model. And if you feel kind of a bit uncomfortable while rotating around the model, as you can see, it's just kind of weird and might feel weird for you if you never used this rotation mode before. You can see here on the right there is option rotate on all axes, and this is what's happening. We can rotate on every single axis and navigate our model in the viewport in any way we want to. But I can press like this button, rotate on y-axis, and this might be a little bit more comfortable for you to work with. So before we begin also, let's look again at the reference and kind of like try to at least somewhat nail the proportions. We don't have like a proper concept art, but we have kind of like this basis for it. So we'll have to guess a lot. And when you're working in the industry and with the models, this is what you're going to be doing essentially. You'll have to figure out, how do I make this 2D drawing? For example, if an artist creates a 2D concept art, you have to figure out, how do I turn this 2D drawing into 3D model? And you'll have to think of the ways how it would look from the back, whether it should look somehow from the back if they have the concept for it or if they don't have the concept for it, and also figure out the proportions. If it's done like in a proper studio, they usually have the proper measurements of what the proportions are for the character or whatever you're sculpting. But if they don't, you'll have to figure it out yourself. So let's start out by making this cube here flatter. So to do so, I press W on my keyboard, and as you can see now, there is this gizmo appeared. So what I can do now is I can just squish it down a little bit like that, and maybe somewhere here on the Z-axis as well. Now I'm gonna increase it a little bit here, and just kind of like try to at least somewhat nail it. I mean, it's not gonna be perfect, but at least somewhat nail it. So once we did that, we can try to already maybe subdivide the model, and you can do so by going to the geometry tab here on the right. So if I go here and press divide, as you can see, the model becomes a little bit smoother, and the rough edges are now smoother as well. If I press divide again, And you can see it becomes even more smoother. And so when you're usually modeling, you wouldn't want to start out, straight away with 3 subdiv levels, right? The reason is for that because there is actually way too many polygons. And when there's more polygons, it's harder to modify the model. So you would want to start with the lowest subdiv level possible. And then you would need to increase it, and you can start working with more subdiv levels. In this case, I'll just keep it on 2. I'm gonna press this delete higher because I don't need the 3rd subdivision level for now. And if I press space, I'll get this kind of like window here where I can just change the draw size for the brush, as you can see. So I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. And if I press and hold shift, as you can see here on the left, our current brush that we are using is actually changing to this brush. This is a smooth brush. And with smooth brush, you can just smooth out your model. And as you can see, it really like smoothes out all of these rough edges. But before we do so, I want it to be symmetrical, because if I start smoothing it out on one side, as you can see, other side still remains untouched. So let's turn on the symmetry. I can do so by going to transform, activate symmetry, and now it's activated on the x-axis. So if I start smoothing it out, x-axis controls it from the back, and you can know which axis is how and which axis is controlled by looking at this kind of gizmo. It can help you out to navigate within the axes, where is what. So in this case, x-axis, as you can see, kind of like puts it from the front part and the back part, but I want it to be from the left to right. So I would use z-axis. So let's go to transform, let's go to z-axis, and now we can start smoothing it out. So I'll just gently smooth it out because we are going to be constantly improving the shape of this model. It's not like immediately set, and that's something that you're also going to have to get used to, is that the model and the shape of the model is going to get only more and more modified throughout your whole journey of making this model. So okay, I think that's good enough. So let's add another cube. I'm gonna go to subtool here and press insert and just add this cube 3D. So the same W for the gizmo, and I'm just gonna locate it and position the bottom part of the ice cream somewhere here. Maybe kind of like that. And as I said, like, we are going to be constantly modifying the shapes, so don't worry too much about getting it super perfect yet. We'll get it there eventually, but as for now, just kind of like try to nail it at least somewhat similar to the reference. And don't forget to actually check on the reference, right? Because also that's what I've noticed with my students, is that they just like start doing their own thing, and then like at some point it just goes so far from the reference and they're like doing already something different. I think it's also important to understand that there are like limitations to these tasks, and just like with any job that you might get later on in the future, there are going to be limitations on how to do this kind of stuff, and you need to know them. So yeah, and to know them, you need to check the reference and to see like, okay, so I need to add like the line here, I need to add the melting thing here, I need to add the ice here. So yeah, you can always basically look at it and know where and what is supposed to be. So yeah, I think it's kind of like getting there. I will just position it maybe a little bit down like that, and I'll try to smooth it out. So I'm just gonna zoom in a little bit like that, make it a bit smaller, and maybe I'll subdivide it one time. So, okay, I'm gonna go with shift over it. As you can see, it slowly starts to turn better. One mistake that I did actually is that I didn't turn on the symmetry, and I can go back, and it's actually good practice. As you can see here on the top of the screen, there is like this kind of like line, and if I go back, as you can see, my model also goes back in time, and I can go back almost at any point actually of the model and how it was sculpted. And that's one cool thing about the ZBrush, that it keeps all of these like steps and every single strokes that you make on top of the model, in memory, so we can go back to it. But another downside of it is that the ZBrush files are usually like, I don't know, 7 gigabytes, 5 gigabytes. There's different file sizes depending on the amount of polygons that you have. So yeah, I'm gonna go back to the beginning where it was symmetrical before I modified anything, and I'm gonna enable again the symmetry on Z-axis, and I'm gonna smooth it out. Press OK to remove the history. Okay, so yeah, just like carefully smooth out, something like that. So the next thing we need to do is add this kind of like cutout to the ice cream. So let's do that. There are many different tools in ZBrush and many different ways of how to achieve that result, right? And the way that I'm going to show you is the way that I personally like. And we can use masking. So when I press Ctrl on my keyboard, I have this kind of like, a different brush here in the corner. You can see it's switched to mask pen. And mask pen, you can create masks on your model, and you'll see what they do in a bit. But just so you would know, once you hold Ctrl, it switches to this mask pen brush. And if you start drawing on it, you can create these masks on top of your model. The tool that we want to use is mask lasso. So if I press here, and be careful not to move your mouse down, because it's going to be easily closed. So move it specifically onto the window here. I'm going to select mask lasso. So once I select mask lasso, I also, if I start drawing on the model, as you can see, it also symmetrizes my masks. And I don't want to symmetrize it, because if you look at our reference model here, as you can see, there is kind of like this asymmetrical rough edges. So let's recreate them. I'm going to disable the symmetry, and I'm going to start drawing with mask lasso. So when I start drawing with mask lasso, as you can see, I can create any shape that I want within the mask. And once I apply it, as you can see, the mask itself is kind of like very low resolution. It doesn't have sharp edges that the model has on the reference, right? So what we need to do is add more resolution to our model. And to do so, I'm just going to go to geometry and press divide a couple more times. And now, if I go over the model here, as you can see, the mask is more higher resolution. So let me add one more subdivide level and draw the mask again. As you can see, it's already much higher resolution. So essentially, don't worry about the high subdiv levels right now, because we're going to be zero meshing and dynameshing our model before we get to the final step. Right now we're just going to be messing around with the topology, not really worrying about it too much, because we're just sculpting. And then later on we're just gonna really get it all together and have a good topology. But as for now, let's just get the basic shapes at least as close as possible to the reference. So yeah, essentially I'm gonna start drawing similar kind of like cut here as it is on the ice cream. It looks like kind of like there is a smaller circle, then there is a bigger circle, and then there is another smaller circle. So let's try to do something similar. So I'm gonna start with smaller circle, then bigger circle, and then smaller circle again, something like that. Oops. Oh, that can happen. This can happen if you have a pen similar to mine. This is Vacuum tablet. If you press a button here, it can move your screen. So be careful not to press this button by accident. So again, I'm gonna go over the lasso here, draw this. And it's really up to you how exactly you want to make the bite. You can experiment. As I said, you don't really have to follow step by step as I do. Maybe you want to experiment a little bit more with the curvature of the bite here. Maybe you want, instead of doing 3 circles, maybe you want to make like a couple more, if you think it's going to look better this way. I mean, it's really up to you to experimentation. But just remember that there is a reference, and you can always use the reference to kind of like get the idea at least of how to deliver what you want to deliver. So okay, one smaller circle, one bigger circle, and one smaller circle. That's it. So now what I'm going to do is press Ctrl I, and then the selection of the mask that I've created got inverted right now. And now, as you can see, I can press Ctrl I again. So essentially I can switch in between the areas. So unselected areas become masked, and masked areas become unmasked. So I want to have this area that we just selected to be unmasked. And the reason is for that because we're going to delete it right now. And I can delete so by going here to the visibility and pressing hide points. So once I hide those points, as you can see, I look inside of the model, it's like empty, there is nothing. And we don't really see anymore this part that we deleted. But the thing is, it's actually still there. If I press show points, as you can see, it appears back again. Well, what we want to do is hide this. And then we want to just delete it. So if you go to geometry, tab here, and to the modify topology, I can press delete hidden. So once I press delete hidden, as you can see, it says, oh, you have too many subdivision levels. So let's delete all of them. Delete lower. And I'm going to press again delete hidden. And now this hidden topology got deleted and it's not there anymore. So we can press close holes. So as you can see, once I press close holes, and it's essentially just connected these parts together and kind of created bad topology here, but it's all right because we're going to be zero meshing and dynameshing all of this. Okay, so that's good. We're at least already getting somewhere. We can start maybe kind of like smoothing out a little bit this area a bit more. And I can also use move brush. If I can press M and W on my keyboard to choose it, or you can just press M and try to find it here in the menu. But I just use M and V. Let me just switch the color here. I just use M and V and I get my move brush. So I can push in these parts of the model inside, normally. So kind of like that. But I don't think it's going to work that well because of the topology here. You see, when I press this wireframe button here, they're just connected really badly together. I mean, ZBrush just did it best. It was like, okay, you told me to close holes and I closed the holes, but it didn't care about the wireframe whatsoever. And we'll have to care about the wireframe because we want to do something later on with this model, right? So let's try to first thing to zero mesh it or dynamesh it. I think in this case it would make sense to dynamesh it because we want to have like a high resolution of the model, but also being able to sculpt on it. So when I go to geometry here and go to dynamesh, and when I press dynamesh here, as you can see, it seems like as if nothing happened. But if I go to wireframe to see what's going on, as you can see, it kind of like created all this really small kind of like voxels on top of our model, and just created this unusual wireframe, but it's somewhat even and it's very detailed. It's much better than than this topology. So with this topology, we can start moving it. It's easier to modify it and do stuff with it. So Dynamesh is great for just getting a quick, nice topology to work with. So okay, let's try to maybe use clay buildup right now. And with clay buildup, we can try to kind of like make a hole here and also maybe even out the edges a little bit. So I'm gonna make my brush smaller, and just to demonstrate what clay buildup does, when I draw on top of my model, as you can see, appears kind of like this extrusion. And it's very rough. The clay buildup is very rough, but it's used very, very often in sculpting. So when I press Shift, I can smooth out all of those things that I've created. And essentially that's how you add more volume with clay buildup. Okay, so let's go up here. And what I'm thinking right now is that there's too much volume right now here. So let's use flatten brush. I'm gonna press F and find this flatten brush here. And I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger and start smoothing out these areas. So just like going over with the brush and start flattening them out. So kind of like that. And I'm gonna do it gently, and that's the great thing about having a tablet, is that you can do it gently. You can just press really hard and it works stronger. Press like gentler and it works like less. But yeah, I'm gonna go over the edges here because I want to flatten them out a bit more. Shift to smooth it out. Just make it a bit flatter. Great. And now I can use clay buildup to just kind of like, you know, there is one way to do that would be to just start, you know, pressing Alt, and you can invert the stroke. And once you invert it, you can go, you know, inside and start drawing the inside part of the ice cream. That's one way of doing that. And, you know, I feel like we should try it out because, you know, if you haven't worked with clay buildup, it would be kind of like nice for you to try it out. So just like that, I'm just going over these areas. As you can see, we start digging it in. And the clay buildup is great for when you need to, you know, make smaller adjustments, kind of like this ones. You can also increase the intensity to make your brush stronger. And, you know, obviously just starts to digging in deeper now. And there's, yeah, just a bigger hole essentially. And as you can see, there's a weird stuff start to happen inside because the topology is already getting, as you can see, too stretched out, and it starts to creating these different artifacts. So we can press, like, again, shift to smooth it out, because in this part, you know, we actually don't really care about the insides too much, because it's going to be, as you can see here on the reference, covered with this melting part and the blue part. So we're not really going to see this inside part. We're not going to be able to see edges. So yeah, we can start doing this. Another interesting thing that we could also do is actually mask out the areas that you don't want to mess around with. So for example, when I press Ctrl here, and I use mask pen, and with mask pen I can just, like, you know, go over the edges, because I don't want to accidentally use clay buildup on them and just move them somewhere else. I just want them to be kind of like closed off. And now I can, you know, go around everywhere I want to, closer to the edges as well, because those areas are masked now. So yeah, that's one way to do it. Another way would have been to just use the mask and push it in, but I thought it would be interesting to try out the clay buildup method. Okay, so once we are done with this, we can deselect the selection by pressing Ctrl somewhere else. And as you can see, there we have kind of like already the inside part of the ice cream here. So what I want to do next, and, you know, we're going to continue on obviously making it smoother and nicer, but as for now, I want to continue on adding other parts, elements. We can also add the mouth here. And so the mouth, we need to understand how far is it from the bottom and how far is it from the top. So kind of like try to nail it with your eyes. So from the bottom, there's like a little bit of the space here. So I'm going to look at my model here and find a little bit of space somewhere here, make my brush smaller, and start kind of like drawing where the mouth would be. So somewhere in this area. So I'm going to draw the mouth here. Smooth it out. And again, push it in, and just gently, 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 I would draw the outline kind of like that. And again, I'm going to be obviously redefining the shapes more and more and more over time, but as for now, it's just good at least having some sort of a placeholder already there in the place, so that we'll be able to come back and to modify it however we want to. So I'm going to use move brush to move it around a little bit, so that would look better. And as I said, I want you to experiment, to really try out the tools, to get the feel for them. And don't worry, like, you know, you don't have to do it real time with me. You can pause the video, you can just come back to it and redo everything. And yeah, and just come back to wherever you stopped. So yeah, let's position it somewhere here. I think that's fine. And let's also add now a ice. So for the eyes, I would essentially just go to the subtool here back and press insert. And I think we can use just simple cylinder. I'm going to insert the cylinder here and press W, make it smaller, extrude it, make it even smaller. Oops, like that. And kind of like approximately position them where they are supposed to be, somewhere here. Gonna make this a little bit smaller, kind of like that. Let me check how this on the preview here. Okay, so yeah, just position it somewhere here. And you know, as I said, we can always change out the position later on, but all I care about is just like at least finding somewhat accurate location for the eyes. Okay, good. Another thing I want to do is smooth out the edges here, because they are a bit too rough, kind of like that. And now what I can do is, you know, when I press W, and if I hold Control and start moving it, as you can see, I'm duplicating this model. And the previous model that I had gets masked so that it wouldn't be moved anymore. So now I can move it around. And in this, as you can see, version here, it looks like one is kind of like on top of each other, but they are like clipping a little bit, I think, in this case. But we can do either way. I don't think it would be that noticeable whether they're clipping or not, but I'd prefer for it not to clip. So position it somewhere here like that. Let me go to the move brush. And I'm just gonna start pushing in these corners here. And you know, when you're zoomed in a lot, you might not know how to rotate around because, you know, you start pressing on the mesh and it doesn't just rotate. So you can use actually this kind of like edges here, you see, like on the top and on the right here, and they will allow you to rotate however you want. So I'm gonna rotate somewhere here, zoom out a little bit more, zoom in, and just make the brush a bit bigger and just pushing it in like that. Smaller, bigger, yeah. I'll push it in like that and push it out in the middle. You can also make the brush smaller for finer adjustments, but yeah, I'll make it kind of like this, and let's just see how it looks like from afar. You can press F to frame your model, and let me just put it in the correct view. And also right now, what we are looking at, this is orthographic mode. So if you're unfamiliar with orthographic or perspective modes within the 3D space, essentially orthographic mode means that there is no perspective. Because if you look at the items in real life, they usually tend to kind of like go together like that into one point. And you know, if you look at the railroad, and if you look at the distance, the railroad kind of like starts to go into one point, and this is the perspective. And every item in real life has the perspective. But in orthographic mode, there is no perspective. So the items that are close to the camera or far from the camera, they are the same size. Yeah. So we can preview this model in the perspective mode by pressing P. And we can kind of like see, yeah, this perspective. As you can see, the model feels a little bit different. So perhaps you're not really pleased with like certain parts of it and you want to like modify them a bit more. You can do that. Okay, so after creating the eye like that, I would deselect now this mask like that. And what we can do, we can either duplicate the subtool, or we can also duplicate the whole thing and just move it to the other side of the face of the ice cream. So I think it's better to duplicate it because we'd be able to control individual elements and we wouldn't have to mask it every time. I'm going to press duplicate here, and I'm just going to move it around like that. Okay. So just to also, for those who want to like know how to modify the gizmo so you wouldn't have to like awkwardly move it like that, you can actually press like this lock button and open it up. And now you can locate the gizmo however you want, you know, and lock it back in, and now you can move it. So, okay, so once we position the part of this eye in the position that we want to, essentially we're already getting closer to our model. Here, mine is like, is mirrored. Yeah. And maybe actually I can, no, it's fine. Yeah, so I'm gonna like now start defining this part of the mouth a bit more. And also, I think we need to add this area here and define it also more, as well as the tongue. Okay, let's actually start out with the basics. So we'll add all the elements that we need. So I'm gonna add now the tongue here. I'm gonna add this cube, move it here, make it a bit smaller, even more smaller, and position somewhere here. Then flatten it out, then also narrow it down a little bit like that, and position it somewhere here. And I think the tongue of the ice cream is a bit thick, actually, a little bit. It seems to be like hanging out of the mouth quite a lot, so I'm gonna make it a bit longer. So once I do that, I'm just gonna smooth it out again. I'll try to use the symmetry here. So activate symmetry on Z-axis and smooth it out carefully. Just gonna start using tablet here and just start moving the tongue in the position that I want to. And the great thing about symmetry that it's gonna move it automatically on all the sides, so we don't have to worry about the other side of the tongue because it's gonna get symmetrically moved. I'm gonna make it a bit smaller here and kind of like that. Yeah. Okay, so we're kind of getting closer to the reference. I think we need to position it a bit lower, kind of like this. And also, yeah, add a more curvature to it. So I'm gonna zoom in like that and add a bit more curvature and maybe smooth it out a little bit more. Let's shift very carefully. Okay, cool. So now I want to add like on the top here more defined inner part, sharper edges, and the melting part as well. So let's actually define a bit more the top part of the ice cream. So right now the topology is horrendous, you know, it's horrible, it's really, really bad, but at least we have separate polygroups, which is actually very, very nice. So, and I'm gonna explain more about the polygroups, so don't worry, and we're gonna probably recreate those. So yeah, let me just start to dynamesh this mesh one more time so that we would return all the resolution. Dynamesh it. Let me check if it got dynameshed. Okay, cool. So now I can use again maybe flatten brush and go over the inside of the ice cream here. I'm going to increase the intensity a bit more because it's very weak right now. And yeah, just simply start going over these areas, maybe even more. Oh, I would switch from the stroke, from the dots to freehand. Smooth it out. Smooth it out. Smooth it out. So yeah, something like that. Just carefully smoothing it out and adding more detail here and there. And now I also want to go over these edges. They're a bit too rough. I want to make them a bit more flat. So I'm just going to gently go over with the brush over them, kind of like that, gently. Oops, Control Z to go back. Yeah, and we're gonna zero mesh this area so it would have better topology, so it's gonna be all good. And I want to define this also a bit more, so I'm gonna dig a little bit more deeper here, just like that. Also, there seems to be some sort of volume here. Not sure what exactly it is, but I'm gonna flatten it out here as well. And yeah, I want to sharpen it up a bit more here, so gonna go a bit more over with the flatten brush. Okay, so once I did that, I feel like also I want to make this these areas a bit more visible, because I feel like they're not too visible right now for me personally. So I'm gonna with the move brush, I'm gonna move around, and also before I move them around, I actually want to maybe enable the symmetry at least on the back and front, even though it's not super symmetrical, but I think it should work. Yeah. Right? Yeah, it works. Great. So let's start moving it around a little bit more. I'm gonna move it here, here. Just want to define kind of like this curvature a little bit better so that would look interesting. And in a way, you know, if you think conceptually, this is kind of like the hair of the ice cream, I guess. So maybe you can mess around and think of something funny for this model. But I'm gonna also think of something interesting. So I'm just gonna move it around a little bit more, make this shape a bit more interesting. Maybe add a bigger hole here, kind of like that. So, and maybe this part, how did they do it here? Okay, so this is also on the reference, it's actually a little bit curved on this part. So I can try to curve it up a little bit here, smooth it out gently, and smooth it out as well here. Okay, so once we did that, now we can start adding the melting part of the ice cream, as well as the inside part of the ice cream. So for the inside, for the melting part of the ice cream, first of all, there is several different ways of how to add this part, right? So we can go to Subtool, press Insert here, and in the insert, we can use any object that we want to. So for example, I can just choose cube. So once I do that, I want to hide everything else. I'm going to press Shift here. As you can see, it hides everything but our model. And I'm going to put the eye here so that it will be visible. So once we have it here, we can use shadow box. So shadow box, I haven't seen people use it that often, but I personally find it very, very useful for creating like all kinds of like different shapes, and they don't have to be super, super perfect, but you can get them really, really fast. So I'm gonna go to shadow box here, press shadow box. And as you can see, this weird box appeared, and you might say, what is this? Like, I don't understand what this is. Well, this is a shadow box. And if you press Ctrl and somewhere in the empty space, this cube disappears in the middle and only this half cube left. So I'm gonna press P to be in the orthographic mode. So this half cube essentially allows you to create any model that you want out of masks. So if I start, like, let's say drawing with the mask, something like that, as you can see, it created a model out of what I drew. So what essentially I can do for this model is draw that drops, that melting part. So as you can see, remember the shape of it, small drop, longer drop, and again, small drop. So I'm going to do the same here. Small drop, longer drop, and then smaller drop again, something like that. And we'll be able to modify it later on even more, but it's just kind of like a fast way to get this specific shape. And as you can see, now it's too long, right? So we can actually look from the side, and now the draw mask from the side here. And if it doesn't work with the drawing, we can make it transparent and just draw it here. Go back. And yeah, we can basically define the thickness of the model. So I'm going, again, I'm going to press Ctrl, go over this, make it a straight line, and I'm going to get this kind of like drop here. So now I can press shadow box again, and now we have the model, and we can use it however you want to. So I'm going to go back here and press Shift here, return everything else, and move this drop here to the correct area. I'm going to rotate around, make it smaller a little bit. And in this case, it's actually in the bigger part, but I think for mine, it would probably look better if it would be somewhere here. I'm going to position it somewhere here. And we're going to obviously connect all of them together later on with the inside part, but as for now, let's just position it in the correct position and split it out. Let me see the topology of this. Okay, the topology is horrible. So perhaps we should dynamesh it. Gonna go to Dynamesh it. Cool. And just smooth it out again. Maybe I'm gonna use Move Brush to just kind of like define the shapes a little bit more. And you know, you can really experiment and add all kinds of like interesting things. My students, they were like creating really unique, unusual drops and with very interesting shapes. They were really creative, and I think you should also be creative when you're creating this kind of stuff. Just really try out like whatever you feel would look great on your model. You should just add it. Okay, cool. So we kind of like have already this drop part. I think the second drop probably would also look more interesting than just like one drop. Just gonna add it gently here, smooth it out gently, add it more, and then Dynamesh it again, and then add a bit more, smooth it out, something like that. And what we can also do is, as you can see, it's a bit flat right now. We can actually add some extra volume here. And to add extra volume, you can use inflate brush. So when I press inflate here, we can start adding more volume. Yep, just like that. And as you can see, I think it looks already a little bit more interesting with just adding extra volume to the melting part. Okay, great. So now we have this, and you know what I want to do is define the mouth better, because right now it's also not that great. I'm gonna use clay buildup again. Actually, let me use Move Brush first and make the mouth a little bit smaller. I think it's supposed to be a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna push it in all together like that. Yep. Smooth it out a little bit around the edges. See on the reference. Okay, so it's a bit wider actually, somewhere here. And on the corners, it seems to be a little bit more flat actually, so kind of like that. And yeah, less wide, so it should be a little bit more narrow. So kind of like this. Cool. So now what I'm thinking, I should go over with a clay buildup brush a little bit to a little bit even out the volumes here before we start ZBrushing it. And I'm gonna explain a lot about ZBrush because ZBrush is a whole topic. It's a whole topic. So possibly it's gonna be in the part 2 of this video. So let's just finish this up. Let me check the topology. Okay, yeah, it's actually quite extruded here. Okay, so I think in the next part of this tutorial, we are gonna continue with ZBrushing, and we are gonna add the melting part here, and we're gonna even it out a bit more, ZBrush everything, and then we'll be able to do UV unwrapping, and after we do that, we'll be able to create our materials, add our materials, and render it out. So if you're from the future, those episodes are already out on my channel and you can watch them now. But if you're not from the future, but if you're from the present, then just follow my channel and look out for the next episode. Thanks for watching. Bye.